Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Beyond the Album Cover, where we get the inside scoop of those in the entertainment industry, celebrate them, and if you know, you know. This man right here is no stranger to the podcast, three-time guest as of right now. Most talented kid in the business. He got the merch that's going fast. You see the Scully, and he got shirts, masks, socks. Next thing you know, he's going to come out with the Law action figure with the Kung Fu grip doll. Ladies and gentlemen, my brother from another mother, Law. Welcome back to Beyond.
Hey, that's the intro, bro. Thank you so much, man. You know how we do it. Thank you, man.
Yes, sir. It's definitely a pleasure to have you back on, and we're just gonna throw conversations out there and let's see what sticks. All right.
Let's do it, man. You know how we do it, raw dog, man.
Yeah. Shimmy, y'all. Rest in peace, ODB.
Yeah, you know.
So, first off, Happy New Year to you and the family. I hope that
you.
everything is blessed and everything. But
good,
last year we lost two pioneers of hip hop. We lost XC from Houdini, and then we just recently lost Shabba-Do from Breaking and Cuddy's
my dance idol, man.
Yeah, man. So can you tell me about first the impact of Ecstasy, Houdini, and why they're not mentioned when you mentioned those top groups that helped pioneer and shape hip hop's early years, and Larry Smith and his production on Houdini?
Well, let me just say this, fam. Honestly, and that's it's not to go against what you just said, but I think only in the smaller technical terms, Houdini's not mentioned. But see, here's the thing: if you love and breathe hip hop culture the way that I do, the way that you do, the way so many of my other friends and even the heroes who we still have here, like Grandmaster Caz and Busy B and Melly Mel from the Furious Five and the rest of the Cold Crush and Run DMC as well and the Fat Boys. So shout out to Kuraski and Prince Marky D. You know, then everybody that knows and lives and breathes hip hop, they already. That's why you think why you think Houdini got love around the world when XC passed away? I wasn't shocked to see that they were R&B people shouting out Ecstasy and people saying that if it wasn't for Ecstasy, I wouldn't have became a rapper. His whole Zorro had his fashion, the way that he rapped in the whole bit. So they are world renowned. They are mostly celebrated in terms of that. Now, in terms of them being in a prestigious hall like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that's another story because they definitely should be in there without question, because right next to Run DMC and the Fat Boys, those three groups, Fat Boys, Run DMC, and Houdini, those are the three biggest rap groups that broke the door down for crossover appeal on the pop charts and in terms of visuality. Because the Fresh Fest tour was what it was. Fat Boys blew up, began doing movies. As you know, they did Disorderlies, and then Run DMC pretty much conquered the whole damn planet. So they basically were able to do what the pioneering forefathers before them weren't really able to do. You know, I mean, we almost came close because Melly Mel was in Beach Street. So we almost came close. But technically, by the time Beach Street came out and things began to change in hip hop, I think Furious Five kind of got stuck in this place. Not on purpose. I'm pretty sure some things happened, but they kind of got stuck in this realm. So by the time Run DMC came out, you know, with Calvin Klein, No Friend of Mine, the one that by his name of Mob, it became like this new era of hip hop, almost in an instant. And this is before Kane, and matter of fact, LL Cool J came out around this time because LL predates Kane and G-Rap and all the other guys that will come after him. So going back to Houdini, you can't talk about the progressive years of hip hop crossover and not talk about Larry Smith's production, groundbreaking production, and Ecstasy's fashion flair, smooth but still aggressive terms of it. Jalil with his rhyme writing, and of course Grandmaster D DJing. You know, and being actually, if I'm not mistaken, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, the first DJ to actually, you know, spit some shit on the mic, you know, so that like on some real stuff. But if I'm wrong, please correct me. But yeah, absolutely. They definitely have impact.
Right, because when I went back and listened to their catalog, especially their Escape album, it was rap, but it had R&B sensibilities.
Absolutely.
I could easily hear Teddy Pendergrass singing the record and have Houdini come in and do a Hot 16 underneath the bridge.
That's true. It's true. It's very, very true.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about us losing Shabba-Do and how breaking pretty much helped breakdancing go mainstream and just his impact on the game.
Well, you see what I just did, right? So
I can't do that. I have two left feet. I have no rhythm.
It's okay. I mean, I do it for the both of us. But you see anybody that's ever seen any of my shows, you've seen clips, of course. You already know that no dance solo of mine, even when I do certain choreography, no matter how modern or group step-ish the shit is, there's going to always be a part of me that will go into a pop and lock or a breaking spell in a second. The importance of Shabba-Do, as you see the night the day that I learned that it happened, I had no plans of going live, but I just, I cried, I got overwhelmed because, as I told the story on my Facebook, when breakdancing and pop lock culture took over the streets everywhere, Chicago, LA, New York, and even down south, because of course we didn't know no better. We didn't know about that other part. New York is the epicenter of hip hop culture, period. So it wasn't until the mid 80s where you really began to learn that we were not the only area. Even though we created it, we realized that it spread throughout the world, all over the world. So now everybody is putting their stamp on it, and everybody when NWA and those guys came out, and you learn, they said, yo, the Crips and the Bloods used to break dance. I'm like, wow. See, I would have never knew that, because my first impression about Crips and Bloods is like, yo, niggas is gang members, and I didn't realize that these guys used to battle against each other to prevent from having to shoot each other. That's a real thing. So the thing is that, and being that breaking was based in LA, you know what I mean? Which it makes even more sense, because Boogaloo Shrimp and Shabba-Do, and along with Anna Lollipop Sanchez, the girl who used to always be killing Kelly in the competition, Poppin' Taco, all of Poppin' Pete, Taco, all those pioneers of the breakdance pop and lock culture, Jeffrey Daniels of Shalimar, the whole Lockers crew in general. That is the foundation of the cornerstone for my generation as we begin to take those moves dance. So when you think about dance like the Cabbage Patch and the Running Man and things of that nature, all of those moves came out of the ability of the flexibility of breakdancing and being able to do certain things with your foot, your knee, things like that. So Shabba-Do, without question, influenced the hell out of me, because between the shoulders of the wrist, the arm, just different, all those different variables of how to move your body and different things that he could easily do. I'm a young kid, and to have a mother who was so damn cool enough to recognize the impact that hip hop was having on her gospel, R&B, funk singing son. Like I said, I'm a singer first, but when I started becoming a rapper, my mom fed my sensibilities. Like, she saw, you know what, this is not really part of my generation, but my son likes it very much. So you know what, I'm going to invest in doing that. So she took me and my brothers and my cousins to go see Breakin', Beat Street, even Crush Groove, and of course Last Dragon, which wasn't really about breakdancing, but because of the culture at that time and because of what was going on, every movie caught the breakdance fever. But if it wasn't for Shabba-Do being the lead in Breakin' and it becoming a box office hit, who knows where dance would have went. Dance would have probably stayed in the same thing that it did in the 70s. So that hurt me to the core, because we spoke a few times. I never met him, but we spoke a few times. I would tag him. He would come on my page and be like, "Yo, man, you looking good, Lord." And that was the best feeling in the world to hear that from somebody who I studied. Because up until he passed, I still would watch Breakin' every time it came on cable or some shit. So rest in peace, man.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to have the chance to interview Shabba-Do years ago on my college radio show.
God bless you.
Very humble, and he was very, very enlightened, and it was just an honor for me to interview him. And Tyrone Proctor, who did some choreography work for New Kids, also got his start on Soul Train. And coming soon will be an interview with Juliet Hagerman from Soul Train. So you get that on Beyond the Album Cover coming soon. Wink,
I can't wait for that, man.
Yes, sir. It's going to be fire. And I want to go back a little bit. You were talking about the Fresh Fest. For those of you that don't know about the Fresh Fest, it was the first tour to go in arenas for hip hop. It was put together by Michael Malden, JD's dad, JD,
Jermaine Dupri's father,
and the Freaks Come Out at Night video. He was getting his start breakdancing, popping, locking. cutting his teeth, and then also Chad Elliott, aka Dr. Seuss, the producer,
Yes.
got his start on that tour as well. If you go back and look at Crush Groove, Be My Girl, that is, yes,
And I want
that
you to
Chad.
be my girl.
And also got to give a big shout out to Sal Abatella of Disco Fever and Fever Records. Definitely
Yes.
big contribution in hip hop, and also he helped contribute to what we now know and love as freestyle.
Yes, absolutely.
To talk a little bit about freestyle
Oh, yeah.
and its impact in music and how certain producers and acts were able to mesh the Latin rhythms with the hip hop sounds.
You know, as you probably saw recently, I've had three very key elements to freestyle because everybody always says, I never try to get into unless it's a direct influence like a Larry Graham, which we know he's the inventor of slap bass. When it comes to the origins of certain techniques in music, I'm always very subjective when I talk. So when I don't know the definite, I always put the key elements that help start it together. Because honestly, whoever came first is neither here or there for me when it comes to freestyle music. But I will say, I had Lisa on here, as you know. I also had Bow-Legged Lou, Full Force Productions, and I also had Angel of the Cover Girls. So, my very good friend. And here's the thing about freestyle. I always make this joke. The best part about freestyle music is one thing is always going to be guaranteed. Freestyle music combines the best elements of pop, electro, techno, and R&B settings, all with a Latin president, simply because of the fact that most of the people, not counting Shannon, because Shannon definitely is a freestyle queen, because Let the Music Play was a trendsetter. But I'm saying more so after Shannon, there's only a handful of girls of that complexion that had did those kind of records. So when people like Brenda K. Starr and the Cover Girls and Lisa and different people of that, it became like, and even Expose, because Expose was the two white girls, and I think Janetta's Mexican. I'm not sure. I think she's Mexican. She's definitely of Latin descent, but that became the personification look-wise in terms of the girls. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, freestyle, even though we had Stevie B and George Lamond and of course, without question, TKA, the kings of freestyle, without question. It was a woman-dominated genre. So the thing is that the one thing I always make a joke about is freestyle music is the one genre that I guarantee you that will have every Hispanic, Latin, Black, and white girl singing to the top of their lungs like they wrote these songs, because these songs spoke to teenage love and being foolish in love, or the idea of being in love. It spoke directly to the teenage consumer, and it was backed by these infectious beats and melodies and strong hooks that you couldn't deny. That's why I had to have Angel on my show. And Angel don't do a lot of interviews. That's why I was very fortunate that, being that we've been friends for so long, her and her husband, shout to Latif, like he's like, that's because we trust you, Law. And I said, that's because she's a pioneer in this game. And anybody that doesn't know that, you can't talk about freestyle music without talking about Angel's voice. Her voice became a very signature, distinct voice that helped a lot of other girls get their swag later on down the line. So freestyle music, I paid attention to very early while I was listening to all these other things of music that was coming out between 85 and I'm going to say let's just say 96 to be exact, because even some of the freestyle artists were still either making music or the old shit was just still getting so much play. So the impact of freestyle music will never ever die, because as you can see, before COVID hit, Cover Girls, Little Susie, George Lamond, and different people who were, even people who weren't freestyle necessarily, were affiliated with that because it became a sonic movement of niggas. And I hate when people be like, oh, these one-hit wonders, or they had a couple of few records, or it didn't matter whether you have one hit or two. The bottom line is that it signals a movement of what that era represented. And that song takes you back to where you were when you first heard it. And freestyle really has that ability, thanks to the cross-pollination of R&B, pop, and even techno stuff, or not even techno stuff, but stuff that would influence techno years later. You look at Calvin Harris and all these different people like LaBouche, and remember all the people that came out? They all took their cues from freestyle producers and freestyle music. So yeah.
Right, definitely that. And we're gonna stay in the mid 80s, and I'm gonna back up to Beat Street, because if you look in the movie Beat Street, Brenda K. Starr
Uh-huh.
was one of the singers that was auditioning in the club.
That's right.
There's another act that was auditioning in the club at the same time, was a two-man group made up of Mick Murphy, who you can catch my throwback interview with him on YouTube.
Woo!
On Beyond the Album
Guy.
Cover, and David Frank. Can we please talk about the system?
You know, it's so funny you brought that up, because I don't know if you had caught my Dawn Robinson interview yesterday, but you know, because now we're pretty much, for those that didn't tune in, you know, we're going to start working together. And one of the things that she has said before we even confirmed any of that shit was, she's like, you know, I've been getting into the system a lot lately, which is interesting because, you know, the system is just one of those special units, almost like a Hall and Notes, in my opinion, even though David Frank doesn't necessarily sing, but Frank's musical mindset, you dig what I'm saying? And combined with Mike's ability to write and to sing and put things together, You're in My System and Don't Disturb This Groove. I mean, that's two of their biggest, most popular records as a duo. But for anybody that has any one of the System albums, you already know they were the best parts of what I call synth R&B, simply because at that particular point in time, the R&B sound was starting to change, thanks in part to P-Funk and definitely Leon Sylvers and Kashif. They were they were leading the charge in the early 80s with the MIDI and different things that were being used in the studio with drum programming, synthesizers. So now nobody needed to come in with a band no more unless they were trying to prove a point. So the last band to have an impact like that, where it was like a whole bunch of members, was Daz Band with Let It Whip. And if you notice, that was their biggest record. And in a lot of ways, outside of the stuff that we may know and love, that was their last huge record, because by that point in time that Let It Whip hit big, the band thing wasn't really in like that anymore. Even Kool and the Gang, even though they were still operating as a band and they were winning, the sound on the albums were totally different. After the Tonight album, after the In the Heart album, the whole Fresh album, in case you didn't know, that's the Emergency album. And Robert Kool told me this. I'm not telling you anything that's not rumor. That whole album is Clay guitar and Curtis Williams, the keyboard player, and a couple of songs with Robert playing bass and JT. That's the whole album. That's not all the other guys on the record, except for like the horn parts with DT and all those guys singing backup. But that's not the whole group on that whole album. And that's their biggest record. But anyway, the System to me represents that era that R&B was going through a serious transition. Now we're in the contemporary R&B lane. You're in My System was part of that unit. So we can't talk about 80s R&B and not mention the System. They definitely were part of the movement that was growing to where R&B would eventually become New Jack Swing and all these other different things that would take over. So absolutely.
And if you go,
very important group.
Yeah, and if you go listen to Phil Collins' No Jacket Required album, you'll see David Frank's name on the credits for his work there.
Yes.
He also co-wrote The Hardest Thing for 98 Degrees, did plenty of other stuff, and You're in My
Genie in the
System,
Bottle for Christina Aguilera.
getting that pop money, and You're in My System was so good, the late Robert Palmer had to cover it.
And even, mind you, even Prince used to do it during soundcheck, believe it or not.
Oh, I did not know that.
I have the audio recording for that. A lot of people don't have that. Yep, Prince did it for the soundcheck.
Nice. And we mentioned that the 80s R&B, early to mid 80s was going in a more synth direction. This one solo artist that gets overlooked, but he had some bangers like Love Light, I'm Freaky, Happy Together, You and I.
Oh yeah.
The theme for Soul Trains are coming from 83 to 87.
Oh my God.
Let's talk about Mr. O'Brien.
O'Brien, man.
And his cover of You and I is the best Stevie Wonder cover I've heard. That and Intro's Ribbon in the Sky.
I agree. O'Brien, man, listen here. Oh my God. I can see this is why we can have these conversations, because again, unless people who are watching this right now, or who will be watching this, unless they're deep into the culture of R&B the way we are, especially myself, because in this conversation, I'm the musician, and you're a diehard music fan that knows his shit. So that's why it's like the combination of that. They wouldn't really understand unless they're that deep like us. But O'Brien was ahead of his time with his image, with the way he approached songs, vocally, you know, on a lot of different levels, on, you know, having strong vocals, but possessing that smooth quality to deliver those type of songs. Because, you know, back in those days, if you couldn't do a cover justice on the same level or better, it was a sin to touch any cover song. So he did You and I justice. And O'Brien, to me, does not get enough mention in these conversations when we talk about great R&B male singers from that 80s period. He's definitely in the top 5 without fucking question.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like I said, his You and I cover. I didn't know about Stevie's original until years later.
Oh, wow.
When I heard it on radio and then saw the Good Times episode where Ralph Carter was singing it at Thelma's wedding. That's how much he did for that record. And then when I interviewed Rodney from Troop, he was saying that Troop did a good job of always having a knack for covering the right records and doing it justice with All I Do Is Think of You and then Sweet No. Like in the O'Brien case, I didn't know about the original records until years later. That is definitely a testament to you doing a record justice. Now back up to the system once more. If you go and look at this album by a 3-person group called Attitude, I believe the album's called Pump Up the Nation. There was this on there called If You Can Read My Mind, which was a staple in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you know K104 in the mid 80s, you know that was your record on the Quiet Storm back on Dallas and K104. There was a young woman that was the vocalist on that in that group, I should say, and she's done vocals for many artists, most notably The Boss, Cindy Mizell.
Let's
talk about Cindy Mizell.
Cindy. Oh my God. Check this out. Alongside the great Lisa Fisher, alongside Tawatha G, M2 for those that don't know, alongside my big sis, Nikki Richards. I know I'm forgetting a few other names, like probably Darlene Love, and Cindy Mizell is, and Audrey Wheeler as well, my aunt, I call her auntie. Cindy Mizell is in that collection of what I call the A-list background singers who are notably incredible lead singers, but because their background game was so strong that even when they weren't recording their own stuff or being a part of different projects, when you saw Cindy's name on any damn album or any one of those names I just mentioned, you knew that it was going to be some shit. Like especially on them Stephanie Mills albums, like the back, they represent that quality. So Cindy is definitely in that preference. And of course, an honorable mention, shout out to one of my biggest idols, Sharon Bryant of Atlantic Starr, because when she left Atlantic Starr and did that one solo album and didn't really do another one after that, Sharon has spent her last 20, 30 years singing backup on for everybody. And people, when I saw her in the crowd and I noticed her, they were wondering, they couldn't even fathom why I got emotional. And we had known each other for years. When we were finally meeting, I said, y'all don't understand. They're part of that collective. So Cindy, without question, is, you know, among that field of these incredible female R&B pop singers who can sing anything and have a weight, worth, and gold with some of her solo stuff that she's done and some of the projects that she sung on, man. So I can talk forever about Cindy's influence, her tone, her phrasing, the way she puts certain things on certain songs, you know.
And do you know if she was related to the Mizell brothers that was in the corporation at Motown?
You know, that's a great question. I really don't know. If I knew, trust me, I would be the first person to say it. But that's a great question. Hopefully, if I ever speak to her or ask somebody that's close to her, I'll probably find out for sure. And of course, if I do, I'll be the first to tell you. I'll let you know.
Exactly. And then also you can go on YouTube to catch my interview that I did with Miss Allison Williams. She was signed to Def Jam. Had My Love So Long record covered Just Luck. And she really got in on being at the ground floor, doing Def Jam's infancy and how she played a big impact on everything that came out. And solely, she was no slouch vocally either.
I've done shows with Allison. That's all I'm gonna say on that. Listen, everything that she says and it's truth. It's so much truth to everything. And I feel like, and I'm glad that you interviewed her. Hopefully, I'll probably get her on my podcast too. Not enough is talked about her, especially in the history of Def Jam. Her and Nikki D, actually, because these were two women. You know, Nikki D is the first female rapper on Def Jam, but Allison Williams is the first female on Def Jam, period, and represented R&B alongside two other notable names that don't get a lot of credit, which of course is the incredible Pimp on Wax, Mr. Orange Juice Jones, and Tashawn.
Oh, yeah, Orange Juice Jones, Darain, and if you look at SNL a couple years ago, Donald Glover spoofed it, and that's where I think a lot of mainstream people first like, what is this? But us in the R&B community, we knew about Darain for years, saying "You without me."
We know
like
what's up. Yeah, exactly.
It's my world, just a squirrel trying to get a nut.
Nut, yeah. You cold busted.
My first impulse was to run up on you and pull a Rambo. About to jam you and flat blast both of you. But I ain't want to mess up my $3,700 lace coat. So instead,
I on the cancel card, on the credit cards.
I stuck you up for every piece of jewelry I ever bought you. Yeah, that's right, everything.
That's my that will never die. I promise you. That shit is to this day. Me and my brother, because me and my brothers are stupid as you know personally. Like we quote stuff from the 80s all the time, be it a movie, a record, even a vocal part. Like we was making fun of Gregory Abbott the other day because he's like, yo, we digging stuff, but that eeny, meeny, miny, mo shit at the end of the record, I'm like, he must have ran out of words at that particular point. He's like, okay, roses are red and violets are blue. I'm gonna rock this world for you. He was like, what the fuck is this shit? But again, we're making fun because we're still celebrating them. Like I said, one of the most important records. But I'm glad that you pointed that part out because you're right. A lot of people, if they don't know R&B culture, they wouldn't be able to pick up on that. The same way how when Halle Berry was on SNL and she was imitating Climax.
Which you can catch my interview on YouTube with Bernadette Cooper.
Oh, wow. See, that's Auntie Diva. That's what I call her. That's Auntie Diva. Love her.
Yeah, definitely check that out. She'll go in on Climax history, work with Jam and Lewis, the whole 9 yards. And, speaking of Jam and Lewis, can we talk about Lisa Keith?
The incredible, or as Jimmy Jam and Jelly Bean both say, the secret weapon. Lisa Keith, white girl, by the way, for those that don't know. Very much like Monty Moore. Two of the Minneapolis Sound Production's deadliest weapons in flight time, without question. So everything else in that particular section where you see Lisa's name on many of those Janet Jackson songs, Alexander O'Neal, even a couple of Sounds of Blackness songs, believe it or not. If you see Lisa Keith's name, 90% of the time, she wrote either the majority of that song, 50% of that song, or she wrote the whole song, period. In addition to what everybody else writes. Because don't get me wrong, Terry is no slouch either. Terry's an excellent lyric writer without question. But I'm pretty sure that he had help along the way with all the artists who could write. But Lisa Keith, like I said, like Monty Moore, was a definite secret weapon by all means. That's why a lot of those songs popped off the way that they did. Her knack for melody and the lyrics that she could write, listen, I can go on talking about Lisa. To me, Lisa don't get the credit that she deserves. We talk about me and Jelly Bean when we were in the studio working on the album. We got into deep, you know how we do. We got into deep conversations because they always be shouting like, "Damn, Lord be knowing." I'm like, because we were studying, we was reading liner notes, and I had never saw her face until probably I'm gonna say 12 years ago. I never knew what she looked like until I saw an old picture, I think on Jelly Bean's feed. So.
Yeah, I never knew what she looked like until on YouTube somebody posted her EPK for her solo record that she put out.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and her just recently did a new record with samples, Making Love in the Rain. So I'm sure somebody is getting those royalties from that. And
I hope it's the right people. That's all I'm gonna say about that. But
right. And you mentioned Monty. And Pleasure Principle for Janet Jackson. That record, if Janet would have passed on it, it would have went on any freestyle record that a girl could probably do because it had like that same element with the doom 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 for tonight. Doo-doo.
Because
about-
Monty is a why do you think I had Monty? That was, you know, as part of my deal with Jelly Bean for She Can Get It, right? Like when
Yeah.
Jelly Bean heard the song and he agreed to do it, I said, okay, Uncle, under one condition. He said, anything for you. We got to have Uncle Monty on keys, because you got to remember, Monty's another one, Secret Weapon. This man wrote If You Were Here Tonight for Alexander O'Neal and co-wrote What's Missing. Like a lot, you can hear certain things. You can hear the difference between all four guys. You can tell when Jelly Bean did a song. You can tell when Monty did one. And you can tell when it was Jam and Lewis with sprinkles of Lisa Keith in between all those things. So they all had their signature things, but it was still all Minneapolis related. So all of those different textures of, you know, different fourths and fifths, of course, because, you know, Monty being a classically trained keyboard player, he knew how to put certain things in there and make it applicable to, like you said, pop or R&B. Everybody doesn't have that gift to make it applicable to both genres. And Monty, without question, had that gift. That's why Pleasure Principle is one of Janet Jackson's most popular records. Certain things, even the bridge that I know what you mean to me. That's so, now from a musical standpoint, you're not a musician, but you gotta remember, me as a musician, that was so abstract. The chords is, that's Minneapolis though. That's that Minneapolis synthesizer that we have to make up for the fact that we don't use horns. And that's because in the time, that was Monty's job. Monty always did the Oberheim synths. That's the whole combination of that. So you're right. You know your stuff, man. That's why I love talking to you.
Yeah, and if you listen to T.I.'s new record, Libra, he did a joint with Killer Mike with samples If You Were Here Tonight.
Yes. See what I mean?
That goes to show you, Jam and Lewis and everybody in that whole Flight Time camp, their work will still be making money long after. And to me, the best Jam and Lewis work for me, Human League, Human. And then
really? Okay.
Because I've read in interviews with Jam and Lewis about how when Human League came to Minneapolis to record, they were used to doing, you know, that whole new wave aesthetic, and Phil Oakey was still singing in that robotic style of, you know, Don't You Want Me?
Yeah, I heard that
get
too.
More soulful. So it was a little bit of a push, but the record became Human League's biggest record, got crossover play. But it makes me wonder if on a lot of those Jam and Lewis records, Alexander O'Neal probably could have referenced a good chunk of them, because I could imagine him referencing Can You Stand the Rain, because if you listen to Sunshine off of Hearsay, that would be like a prelude to Can You Stand the Rain.
Well, you know, here's a little secret for you. You're going to laugh at this. I made a joke to my friend Jermaine Jones one day that you know how you can tell when it's a Jam and Lewis production, because Can You Stand the Rain, If You Were Here Tonight, Come Back to Me by Janet Jackson, Sunshine, and even Tell Me If You Still Care. You know those are all the same key?
Oh yeah, because I can hear it in the keyboards. Like, dude,
those are all the same, different chords, but they're all the same key. Jam and Lewis, just like how Larry Graham's favorite key was E, James Brown's favorite key was D, because most of James Brown, I could do a 30-minute James Brown show with the same songs and put one on top of the other, because they're all in the same. Most of James Brown's songs are in the key of D. So it's easy for me to go from Mother Popcorn to Sex Machine to Give It Up, Turn It Loose to Pass the Peace. It's the same key, different arrangements, but the same exact key. So with Jam and Lewis, it was always that particular key. If you put all those songs together along with I'm Only Human, it's like, wow, you can tell now, you can really see how they wrote this shit.
Yeah, that's their go-to spot. And then if you listen to this cut, that was a B-side of Miss You Much called You Need Me. If you listen to the vocals,
You Need Me. Oh yeah, I know.
Janet probably revisited that when she was in the studio recording and if you listen to the bridge on that record, I get the same breakdown vibe like New Edition and If It Is in Love.
It's called trademarks, because see, a lot of times, me and Bow Legged Lou from Full Force, we talked about this, because it's like with them, when they produce for other acts, like remember, but you didn't catch the interview, but if you did, like I played some of the stuff that they did for Britney Spears. And the first thing I said to Lou, I said, yo, big bro, why does this sound like All Cried Out? And he began to laugh. Because the whole point was that it's easy to take. Same thing with what's their biggest record for the Backstreet Boys?
All I have to
But
give.
my love is all I have to give. Without you, I don't think I could live. That sounds like Full Force. That whole the vibe of it is Full Force. It's just that Backstreet Boys are singing the song. So because I've studied them the way I studied Shaka, the way I studied everybody who I love and influenced me, you can always tell where the influences are in the trademark of a production of people. Same thing with Babyface. You can tell, like you see After 7, Heat of the Moment. That's, you can tell it's even though it's his brothers, but you can tell that Babyface wrote the shit because it has that vibe. Like Babyface had a vibe. And I love the way you love me. That whole that's Babyface always had a thing for that type of choppy sort of vocal thing that him and L.A. Reid and of course Daryl Simmons all came up with. So those are called production trademarks. Even the one you just yelled earlier with My Name, you know, the whole law, and I got that from P-Funk because Glenn Goins was having a riff moment in Bigfoot music, and he just like, Lord, like he would do that, and I'm like, he always ends with Lord. I'm just like, it sounds like he's saying Lord. So I took that and used it for my trademark and just said Lord, and that's how that came about. So when people hear me producing on the track, or they hear me getting ready to say a verse while I'm singing, they're going to hear that trademark. So every producer and songwriter has an established trademark. Jimmy Jam and Chuck, even Leon Silvers, believe it or not. I could always tell because Leon had this certain way he played the bass like nobody did. You could tell on them Solar records that when it was Leon or Foster, because Foster played bass on a lot of those Whisper records, not Leon. Leon may have wrote them, but Foster played bass on a lot of those records. I learned that when Leon told me, which I never knew until I read the credits. So long story short, every producer and songwriter and even singer has trademarks that they bring to any situation where you're going to know it's them. Look at Chaka Khan in Higher Love when she sang with Steve Winwood. She's just singing in the background, but you can hear that. I'm like, that's Chaka. Because you can hear the timbre in Shaka's voice. You hear it.
Yeah, you definitely hear it. And you mentioned Full Force's work with Backstreet Boys, Britney. They also did work on
NSYNC.
And it brings me to the mind of a country known as Sweden. And I think Sweden, they have a knack for making great pop records. The late Dennis Pop, Max Martin, Herbie Kreislow.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
That whole Sharon Pop Studios era. Because look at it, when Ace of Base broke big here in America, they're the only international act to have the #1 album and song of the year in the U.S. in '94. And the work that Robin did, that predated.
Oh man, woo!
What do you think it is about Max Martin, Dennis Pop, and Herbie, where they all had a knack for making those great killer pop records in Sweden in general?
Because
ABBA as well.
Because here's the thing, and this is me speaking from a producer's perspective. To me, the best producers, and this is my opinion, you can quote me on this, the best producers, in my opinion, you can quote me, are the ones that have an ear for all styles of music. This is why we're still talking about Quincy Jones 50, 60 something years later. Because see, Quincy took the best elements of jazz, blues, and then even when it developed into R&B, I remember Quincy Jones was there from like the 30s and 40s. So when musical styles begin to change, other producers didn't know how to adapt. Like, how do we produce this disco music? And here comes Mr. Quincy Jones. Listen to a record like Stomp by the Brothers Johnson, produced by Quincy Jones. Listen to that intro. Disco like a motherfucker. Bum, bum, bum. Strings.
4 on the floor.
4 on the floor. But watch this. Look, check out what I'm saying. 4 on the floor. But listen to that string arrangement. Classical music. He knew how to make the new school shit pop off, but still maintaining the level of excellence of what pop music is built on. Because people forget that pop is short for popular. And in order to adapt, you have to know equipment. You have to study the latest technology. You have to study how do I make this work? That's why a lot of geniuses that we call, producers from the 80s all the way to the 90s, they knew how to stay afloat. So when people like Max Martin that did all the, all the boy band stuff, and of course, the people behind, even Frank Farian that produced Milli Vanilli, because in case you didn't know, Frank Farian had a group back in the day. That's why the whole Milli Vanilli thing was actually funny, because he had a group in the late 70s called Boney M. And the funny shit about that record is that the guy who he had doing all that crazy stuff on stage, that wasn't his voice. So Frank Farian had been doing that for years, about having a certain vision of a record, but then using a visual template to subside with it that wasn't on the record. So a mark of a good producer knows how to put certain things together that can work. So I'm saying this to say that in the 90s, when all that pop Swedish thing, European version of it, because the technology, even in Germany, has always been advanced. Another person that does not get mentioned, because if it wasn't for Giorgio Moroder, and I know you know who that is, if it wasn't for George, that's Donna Summer's producer. They were doing techno music in 1977. You know what I'm talking about?
And shout out to Kraftwerk.
I Feel Love. You know the story behind that, right?
Yeah.
When they did that track, David Bowie told, God bless his soul, David Bowie told this story all the time. David Bowie said he'll never forget, he was sitting in the studios in 1977, early 77. The album wasn't even out yet. And Brian Eno, who produced Roxy Music, I don't know if you know about Roxy Music, he said, yo, David, I just heard The Future. This is 77, bro. 77. I'm about to play. Listen to this. Do you hear that synchronized drumming? I'm telling you, this is going to be the wave of the next generation. This is Brian Eno talking before the 80s. So to be honest with you, it's been happening because there were a lot of people, Brian, all those guys from Europe, Brian Eno, and I think Giorgio Moroder, I think he's German, but they all were produced, a lot of Donna Summer's records were produced in Europe and in America. So disco created house music. You gotta remember, it's all relative. So when the pop 90s thing came along, all these producers were doing were basically reproducing what would have been hot in the 70s. Be my lover, won't you be my lover? It sounds like it could have easily been made in the 70s with disco music. The only difference is that now we had new equipment. Now we had drum machines. We don't have to have the drummer playing for 5 hours straight and injuring their foot and their foot getting tired, because now we had a drum machine and a synthesizer that did all of the work that made it easy for a lot of these producers to take their place in pop music history.
Yeah. Now I don't know if you caught the Bee Gees documentary on HBO.
Yes, I did. I watched it twice.
I did not know about their success in the UK before they came over here, and how it was.
Oh wow! Okay.
Because of Clapton, they decided to come record in the US, and then we all know what happened after that.
Well, of course, because but here's the thing. See, the Bee Gees, and who are one of my biggest influences, what people don't realize is that the Bee Gees, very much like the Ohio Players, smart. When I say smart, meaning that the Bee Gees were smart enough to know that this is what we want to do. We love R&B music. So Barry's emulation of his falsetto was in tribute to some of the singers who were singing like that during that period. But the Bee Gees loved that stuff, because here's the dilemma with the Bee Gees, a great dilemma. The early stuff that they put out before Saturday Night Fever and You Should Be Dancing, all that shit, all of their early stuff were covered by R&B artists. I'll give you a perfect example. How can you mend a broken heart? How do you stop the rain from coming down? Now, as we both know, who made that shit popular for R&B?
Al Green.
The Reverend Al Green. Now, a lot of people who wasn't hip to the industry like me and you are, you would have never known it, because Al Green, like he always does, Al Green had the ability to take any song of a pop stature and make it an Al Green record. For the Good Times, that's a country song.
Chris Christopherson.
Lay your head on my pillow. And then the same thing with another Bee Gees record. You don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like to love somebody. Roberta Flack covered that. Donny Hathaway covered that. The Chamber Brothers covered. And they weren't, see what I mean? Like, so the Bee Gees already had an influence on R&B before they fully came into that era of Saturday Night Live and all that shit that would ultimately make them double famous. They was already famous, but once they did You Should Be Dancing and what's the other stuff? We
Night
go on
Fever,
Morning.
How Deep Is Your Love?
They were
Stop
already
Talking.
huge before that, but Saturday Night Fever put them over and they became like the personification of disco, but they were not a disco group. They just knew how to flow with the times and make it work for their musicianship and their songwriting. Point blank, period. They're geniuses.
And then, of course, the true mark of a great artist and a songwriter is when you could just have songs just come out like flowing water. And that's what the Gibb brothers were able to do, to work with Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, writing for their brother Andy. And Barry is going to be eating forever off of the publishing off of those records.
You know that already. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but one record that came out in the 70s that was pop but had a hint of R&B that to me felt like the same vein of New Kids and Please Don't Go Girl for that era was Love Me For a Reason by the Osmonds. I thought that was an R&B record.
Well, I mean, let's talk about the Osmonds for a quick second, shall we? People forget, and this has been a conversation that's been a part of my Facebook for so long, because a lot of people, you realize a lot of people didn't know how deep the Osmonds really were, because here's a mistake that their PR people made. The Osmonds were pigeonholed to be a Jackson 5 ripoff because of the fact that what people don't understand is that the Osmonds were influenced on the Jackson 5 first, going back to when they were little. You gotta remember, the Osmonds were on TV in the late 50s and early 60s, way before Michael and them even was out there. Michael Jackson said in his book, we used to watch the Osmonds on variety television. So that's the first thing about that. So there wasn't no shortage of talent. Both groups influenced each other, because here's a story in case you didn't know. In the mid 60s, the Osmonds have been doing the Andy Lawrence show, which you guys know is a variety, pretty much mainstream white America based shows, doing Broadway stuff, middle of the road white people stuff. Let's call it what it is. And basically, they got tired of that. They said, he said we was on, the oldest member of the band is 17, 18 years old, but we already feel like an oldies act, because we've been, we're thankful to Andy Lawrence for giving us a shot on television, but we're into the stuff that our friends are into. And at that time in the mid 60s, what was popular? Motown, psychedelic rock and roll. The Osmonds were into R&B music. They always been a fan of it. It's like, we want to do stuff like that. But they won't let us until Mike Curb came along. Mike Curb Records, said, listen, I heard y'all guys want to become a pop group, like you want to fit into the vein of what's going on. And Donnie always said that when Jackson 5 came out, of course, we looked at them like, exactly. I mean, not so much, we don't want to be like them, but we want to be accepted in a way where we want to do stuff that we enjoy as well. Like all of our white friends love R&B, like they love Stevie Wonder. What's one of Donny Osmond's most popular songs? You know it. I'm a little bit of country, I'm a little bit of rock and roll with a little bit of Motown in my soul. So the bottom line is that Love Me For a Reason, like a lot of Osmond songs, don't be surprised. One of my friends, Leanne, she goes under Grown and Sexy Music on Instagram. Like she said one night I was playing something on Facebook and she said she flipped. She was like, I didn't know the Osmonds were that funky. I said, are you kidding me? I said the Osmonds have more leadway on their records than the Jackson 5 did. Because I've always said that if Berry Gordy would have been smart enough to allow the Jackson 5 to start writing and producing their own material after the first two albums, the Jackson 5 would have really took Motown to even bigger levels. But see, Berry didn't see the vision, so it took Michael and them having to leave. Whereas Mike Curb, he told the Osmonds, well, the first two albums did well, so guess what? Y'all guys can write and produce your own material now. So that's why when they had that freedom, they came out with Crazy Horses. Funky, rock and roll, guitar solos. Jay Osmond's drummer, he's a beast. They were playing funk, R&B, and rock. So it's almost like it's anybody that knows music and have an ear, they shouldn't be surprised. That's why I said for people that don't know the history, because for years, they always used to get this bad rap of just being the whitest family. You know, they are Mormons, but the thing is just that, no, they weren't trying to copy anything. And matter of fact, they were friends. In case you didn't know, real quick, One Bad Apple was written for the Jackson 5 by George Jackson, who no relation, who's a black guy. But the reason why Berry Gordy didn't accept it is because Berry Gordy wanted to own all the publishing, and George was like, oh, hell no. So I'd rather go to the Osmonds. I'm gonna get my publishing, and these white kids are gonna sing my song. So in retaliation, years later, Ben, yes, Ben was written for Donny Osmond's solo record, but Donny couldn't record it because Donny was on the road with his brother. So what did they do? They said, let's give it to Michael Jackson and see if he can record it. So you see how both groups have always helped each other out and been with each other. I just hated the fact that people always did this whole thing of, well, they're trying to be like so-and-so. I mean, well, everybody know who the template is and who's probably the better unit, but it doesn't really matter because it's all conducive to the flight of the boy band shit. So yeah.
Yeah, kind of almost like the same conversation I had with Danny when we were talking about New Edition and New Kids, how they were they went to their shows and vice versa, and it was all love.
Yeah. Because first of all, you gotta remember, I mean, Donny and Danny said it from the very beginning, and anybody that thinks otherwise, they stupid as hell. From the very beginning of their careers, the first thing they said, not because they had to say it, it's because you couldn't deny it. The look was obvious. They say, look, if anything, we're the white New Edition because those are our idols. That's who we want to be like. And they paid this. And the thing is just that people forget, unlike most groups, New Kids paid their dues. Yeah, I remember it's a difference. New Kids, like Vanilla Ice, was playing to nothing but all Black crowds with no intentions of becoming a mainstream pop act. Donny will tell you in a heartbeat, we wasn't interested in pop music. Vanilla Ice said, never in a million years did I ever think in my days of breakdancing in Dallas, Texas, with the rest of my Black crew, that we would be playing for a majority of a mainstream white audience. Because they were not targeting that audience. They were like, listen, we know where the shit comes from. We comfortable here. I got Black fans. And look what happened. Of course, you know what happens. Crossover appeal. If you whiter than white and you look good, you're going to get the white audience. And so that's what happened with New Kids. Once the white teenage girls saw what New Kids on the Block looked like, it was like, wow, we finally got a group that we can call out the guys that we like, the same way how New Edition had the Black girls and Menudo had the Hispanic Latin girls. But guess what? It didn't matter because all of those groups had all girls. It wasn't just inclusive to race. There's a lot of white Menudo fans. There's a lot of white girls who love New Edition. So you can't, music is colorblind, bro. That's why I get sensitive and I get hyped when I talk about this shit, because the industry created so much ignorance. You dig what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It created a lot of bullshit ignorance where they telling people, well, since you're white, you need to be listening to this. Since you're Hispanic, you should be listening to Julio Iglesias. That's bullshit because I love Julio Iglesias. And I only know basic, I don't know all Spanish, I know basic Spanish, but I loved his voice. So that's what is that telling me?
Right.
You dig?
Yeah, because you could definitely tell the influence of R&B in the early 90s. If you look at those early, the mid 90s Mickey Mouse Club footage with Young Justice, Christina, Britney, they were covering Jade, Mary J. Blige, Jodeci, Whitney, and you could tell that all of them were listening to R&B radio.
You're gonna laugh. It's funny because on Instagram, my brother's on here. Shout out to Casino Chip, my older brother. And here's the thing about me and him. Me and my older brother and my cousins were living in Tucson, Arizona at the time. Now, you know, we from New York. They love us. You know how it is. We on the West Coast. You know, the girls like us. You know, that type of shit. Me and my brother and my cousins are so secure in who we are because we grew up with all types of music. It's obviously because of our skin color, what our foundations are. But me and my brother are the biggest New Kids on the Block fans because when Step by Step came out, when it gets to the breakdown, like step one, we can have lots of, me and my brother used to always imitate each member. Like we would always just do that to have fun. And the girls liked it. They were like, oh, y'all like New Kids on the Block? I said, yeah, I said, it's dope. And then you gotta remember, we had the box at that time. You know what the box was, the request channel, where any given moment, if they request the video so much, you would, you know, you had no choice but to learn the song. So certain songs that we wouldn't hear for periods and periods of time, we became accustomed to it because we loved, like, think about the type of girls we were dating at that time, because we were dating all kinds of women at that time, not just Black girls. Like we were, and the thing is that our taste in music, to be honest, is what kind of got us in these different situations with other people. And then even in certain situations where we would go to these racist apps, you know, Tucson can be very racist, as you know. we would go into record stores and they look at us and they think that we want hip hop. So when they found out who my grandfather was, it's like, hey guys, you wanna? Oh, Santel's your grandfather. We got hip hop, we got R&B, and me and my brother and each other like, these motherfuckers automatically assume that we want to hear rap. No, I'm looking for the first Led Zeppelin album. I wasn't bullshitting. You know me. I wasn't bullshitting. I'm like, y'all know I love heavy metal, right? So my thing is just that it just, again, man, I say this and I say this to end this part of what we were talking about, because music is colorblind. If Rick James and Neil Young can be in the same band together, as you know the history, the Minor Birds, music has no color and boundary. Now, of course, all American music is Black derivative. Make no fucking mistake about it. It comes from us, but it's not subjected to just one color. If you do if you write a Hispanic or whatever other race you are besides Black, if you do the homework, study the culture, and show love to the originators of this, you have every right to do the music that you want to do, that you cater to.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
It's what it is.
One group in the early 80s that was super huge, got airplay on MTV. Heck, they even had their own Atari game, Journey, and Steve Perry. One of my favorite vocalists, because when you listen to him sing, I hear Sam Cooke.
Steve motherfucking Perry. Steve, he's in my top 10 favorite singers overall. Listen to Separate Ways, man. That yell at the end, that there's pain in that voice, man. Like when Steve Perry sings, you believed him. To me, that's what's missing from singers. A lot of singers, they don't. When Steve Perry sang "Open Arms," or "Faithfully," you believe Steve Perry when he sings. He convinced you. Here we stand, with our hearts broken into two. And that you hear that. I heard the soul in his voice. I say he definitely listened to some R&B, because you can't fake that. If you really study the texture of, and mind you, when I saw an interview with him, I learned his favorite singer is Sam Cooke. I'm like, wow, see? And he's a rock and roll guy, but his roots are what? R&B, like Rod Stewart. Same thing.
Pretty much everybody from the UK, we can name Clapton, George Michael, Phil Collins on down, heavily influenced by US R&B. And speaking of George Michael,
they are all R&B disciples, point blank and period, as Tamar Braxton would say.
I agree, because when you listen to George Michael and some of the earlier Wham records, Club Tropicana, then later to Make It Big stuff, and you knew with his writing that he was going to be bigger than a teen idol and was destined for solo greatness. And also, we got to give big shout out, big props and mentions to Dion Estes.
Oh man. Heaven help me talk to strangers. Heaven,
which to me sounded like a Faith cut that was left on the cutting room floor.
You know what? And because Dion is a badass singing and sick bass player, one of my favorite bass players, and it was to me, it kind of was a double-edged sword, because that record was so huge for him, and him and George wrote it. But on some of the press interviews where he was doing his run for the record, all they want to talk about was George. And I didn't like that, because it's almost like, okay, I get it. I mean, of course, George is a part of the record, but y'all keep forgetting, in case you probably didn't know. Do you know that Dion was George's mentor? Do you know that? Did you know that? Did you know that when Wham got signed to Columbia Records, they called Dion to develop George Michael, because George Michael wanted to incorporate Motown with what he was doing. They said, well, let's get Dion Estes, because, he's the Detroit-based king that worked with James Jamerson and played for Marvin Gaye for 3 years. So
the Funk Brothers.
Yeah, so exactly. So a lot of George Michael's swag came from Dion. In case you didn't know, for those who don't know who watching this, a lot of his swag came. So it pissed me off that the one hit record this man finally gets, and I mean, of course, because him and George wrote it together, it was a collaboration. But it's like, I was seeing interviews, he would get frustrated. I could see it in his face. I'm like, yo, man, focus on the fact that this is where George get a lot of his shit from this guy right here. Talk about the lineage and the respect. Thank God George Michael kept them all those years. Every time George went out and did something, he always had Dion with him. So thank God for that. But Dion doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion. Shout out to Dion Estes, man. Bass king extraordinaire, Detroit stand up all day.
And I want to talk about this young group who came out around the late 80s, group of brothers. They were originally signed to MCA, but when Gerald Busby left MCA to go to Motown, this group followed him there in LA, and Babyface laced them with a top 5 R&B and pop hit called Down My Heart. Let's talk about The Boys.
The Boys. Hell yeah. Oh my God, man. The boy, another group, another
You can catch my throwback interview with Bilal from The Boys.
Yeah, man. Another group to me, and reminds me and my brother Casino, we were huge fans of them too, because we always used to joke about their songs and things like that. But we loved them so much because you gotta remember, at that particular point in the game, right before ABC came out, right before some of the other groups who were younger or just as old as they were, the Boys were the perfect glimpse into the future of young R&B groups. Because by that time they came out with Down My Heart and all that stuff, New Edition was now a mature R&B group of grown-ass men. They were no longer teenagers. So here we have these young group of these multi-talented guys who were already putting in work on Venice Beach. You gotta remember, I was a fan of them when they was on Amen and stuff, when they was on like TV shows and stuff. So I already kind of dug their personality, and me and Hakeem the same age. So it's like, I got it. And it really inspired me. So I'm just like, it's just good to see young kids, especially Hakeem, because Hakeem became one of the reasons why I knew I could become a producer, because they
his production,
kids can't produce records. Really? Hakeem produced the #1 record, Crazy, for the second album. So the Boys were, you can't talk about late 80s and early 90s R&B without talking about the influence of the Boys, hands down. And to me, they don't get enough mention in R&B conversations of that period. I totally agree with you.
Right. And then this one group who vocally, as a 4-man group, was nothing to play with, coming out of Oklahoma. Shout out Boomer Sooner. And a lot of people, mainstream wise, only know of I Want to Sex You Up. But if you listen to the whole CMB album, the Time and Chance album, you realize these guys were no joke. Let's talk about a little bit Color Me Bad. You can catch my throwback interview with KT from Color Me Bad as well on YouTube and re-upped on Beyond the Album cover.
Color Me Bad is in my top 5 as far as my era is concerned. When you talk about great R&B groups, and I have a pretty eclectic list. A lot of people will automatically assume, how come so-and-so is not in your top 5? Because you got to remember, I'm a different singer than most people. You got to remember, in most situations, I was either the main lead singer or one of the lead singers. But also, I'm the kind of person, if I don't sing lead, I'm damn sure I can sing some background. Everybody knows that about me. I can do my own harmonies and different things like that. Color Me Bad is in my top 5 because you got to remember, I Want to Sex You Up was the tip of the iceberg. But if you listen to that whole first album, the first 2 albums, to be technically honest, is that they had the combination of all the right elements of the groups that came before them. They had that doo-wop sensibility where they can easily do 4-part harmony at the drop of a hat. Like their version of the Bells is crazy. You know what I mean? So they have that, and then they knew how to make it up to graded pop with the 90s synthesizer, hip hop sound because of what was going on at that minute. And they had the steps, and they could do it live. A lot of, you gotta remember, and I'm not going to say no names, but I am going to say there were a lot of groups during that period that until I went behind the scenes and worked with some of the producers that were part of these projects, I learned a lot. Because I thought, for one, that everybody was like New Edition and Force MDs that could actually sing live and not have to do. Boy, listen here. A lot of groups could not sing like that and still step. So they had to have a lot of people ghost vocaling in the back and behind the curtain and certain buttons being pressed so they can hit the notes or whatever the case may be. And Color Me Bad, of course, was not one of those groups. I've seen them live 3 times, when Arsenio Hall and up front when they played, I think it was Garden when I went to that show. And boy, listen, vocals was on point, moves were on point. So without question, you cannot talk about 90s R&B groups and not talk about Color Me Bad. And to me, they don't get enough mention either, alongside Boyz II Men, Jodeci, and Silk and Azure. Those are part of my top 5. Like they should be mentioned.
Right. And then one R&B group who I felt was on the verge of taking that mantle where New Edition left off in the early 90s, where it was pop look appeal, but had R&B crossover,
I hear you.
was High Five. And Tony Thompson, rest in peace, vocally, he was the truth.
Tony Thompson, that guy, one of the most original and creative voices of that time period. Tony's tone, funny, I said Tony's tone. Tony's tone, I tell you, man, again, not enough honorable mention in my opinion. The way he carried the records, whatever producers they were working with at that particular time for any album in every situation, because truth be told, outside of Treston, and of course Treston provided the bottom baritone, the whole big great voice, and the whole nine. But in addition to all of that, most of the vocal chores being done by Treston and Tony Thompson. Just the combination of that, along with the producers and the people who helped sung on those records. But that's what made the High Five records pop off the way that it did. Because the thing was just that you were able to signal out Tony's voice in that mix, because Tony's voice was just so rich. You know what I'm saying? It was like just really rich and pure on every level, man. You couldn't deny the fact that Tony's voice was golden. And honestly, in my opinion, he's missed. He's missed a lot. I really miss him.
Definitely that Sensational album, dope album. And that kind of leads me back to talking about Giant Records, because, you know, Color Me Bad was on Giant. Jeremy Jordan, who will be on Beyond the Album cover soon, record was on Giant. Good to Go was on Giant. Jay.
Oh, hell yeah. Good to Go. Like, we didn't even, woo.
I felt that Giant had that perfect combination where you had pop and R&B, and they knew how to market it and do it well. Shout out to Cassandra Mills.
Yes,
and you
can
catch my throwback interview
Mills
with
a
her.
genius. Absolutely.
Yeah, but Good to Go, they were the truth. I mean, Never Satisfied was a dope record, but there was this album called Notice Me, which I felt should have been a single. And you can catch my throwback interview with Natalie Fernie from Good to Go on YouTube as well.
Well, I gotta see that interview, because I always wondered what they were doing after that, because I think they only had like 2 albums, right?
I think it was like maybe only 1 or 2 albums, and then another group I think that don't get mentioned enough vocally. These guys hailing from New Jersey, we know them from the Bathroom Scene and Lean on Me. They were signed to
my boy
Records. Yep, My Heart Is Failing Me, White Man Can't Jump.
Yes.
Judy Had a Boyfriend. If You're Serious, talk about Riff.
Well, in case you didn't know, I think you did. I think we talked about it. I had Nitty Green on. R&B pop. It wasn't as aggressive as what the second album would be, To Whom It May Concern. But Riff, another one of those groups, in my opinion. All 5 guys can sing lead. All 5 guys can dance and step. They was putting that work in. But unfortunately, when you signed to a label that didn't really cater to R&B, you gotta remember, they were signed to SBK Records along with Vanilla Ice.
And Barrio Boys as well.
Oh, another group we don't talk about. Another
group, catch my throwback interview with Joe Jacket.
Oh man, that's crazy. See the interviews I don't get, you probably do get, which is amazing. Not because I don't get them, it's just mostly because every now and then, if I'm watching a program, like for example, I Like It Like That came on. I remember the Barrio Boys was on that thing in the scene as a group that got signed to the girl or whatever the case may be. But these are the groups and artists that we don't talk about, because, and Riff being one of those as well, because Riff, to me, they were already kind of on their way. And like Nitty said, if they were allowed to do what they did and the company truly got behind them, Riff would have definitely been heavy contenders alongside the Portraits, the As Yets, and the Ideal, even Ideal. Like Ideal had that shot too. Ideal 4.0. You know, there was a lot of groups, and they were all bad. I heard these guys sing live. All these guys were dope as hell. And again, they just did not get the push that they should have gotten. So Riff was lucky enough, thank God, that they had a movie under their belt. They toured with Vanilla Ice. They toured with LL. So they did make some leverage. That's why they're able to do shows and people show up, because Fifth had a momentum for that period. They had even with 2 albums, they had a momentum, but then they got blackballed in the industry because they didn't want to work with, not them, but some of the members didn't want to work with David Foster, and they said he was one of the ones that wanted to but got outnumbered. So shit happens, man. This industry is a real crazy place, man.
Right. And then one group right around that time period that I am, good friends with some of the members of this group, Shy.
Yes, absolutely. Shy is definitely important. And for me, and then honestly speaking, because this is me respectfully speaking, if you had to put Shy against some of the groups that I just mentioned, it would be a perfect imbalance, if that makes any sense. Because Shy wasn't as aggressive as a lot of their counterparts. They weren't. Because remember, their success as a group was built on a pure a cappella song. Whereas somebody like Boyz II Men, let's take Boyz II Men, for example. Boyz II Men blew up pretty much with Motown Philly, which was an incredible feat, because usually when most groups come out with an up-tempo, they don't win. And Boyz II Men won. See, Jodeci tried the up-tempo thing first. It didn't work for them.
Nope.
Until they did Forever My Lady. So look at a group like Shy that has some dope up-tempos on their first album. But what blew up Shy as a group? This If I Ever Fall in Love, straight up a cappella record built upon their voice. And then Comforter, to me, Comforter was a better record, in my opinion. Comforter was a better record. And I think Shy just never really, in my opinion, they had one record. This is the place where you belong, right here.
The place where you belong.
To me, Beverly Hills Cop 3 soundtrack. But here's the funny thing. I felt like if they would have stayed in that, this is just my humble opinion. If they would have stayed in that direction, Shy could have continued on and got even better in their group setting among. You gotta remember, even though you're not competing against other groups, let's call it what it is. The competition is fierce, for lack of a better word. It's fierce. It's strong. You got to either come with something that gives you your own lane, or you got to even follow a template of another group until you find your footing. There was no in between. You dig what I'm saying? That's why Silk was successful, because nobody sounded like Silk, and Silk could dance, but they couldn't dance like even Boyz II Men weren't the best dancers at all, to be honest. And same thing with Jodeci. They tried to dance, and it just really didn't pop off. To me, look, Silk was better dancers than both of those guys. But the thing is just that they all had something unique. And Silk just, thanks in part to John's falsetto, and then Little G just being all over. Little G's range is ridiculous. So it gave them a lane that no other R&B group had. But when you look at a group like Shy, you got to wonder. The only lane that they had was the fact that their first hit record was an a cappella record, and then they followed up with Comforter and a few other dope records. But to me, it just, even when they did the second album, it just didn't resonate after a while. Not because they weren't good. It was simply because it wasn't a batch of a lot of material being had. In my opinion, they didn't have the best material. That's just my standard opinion on that. But,
right.
What do I know?
Yeah, and then also another group that was out at that time, another 4-man group out of, I believe, California. Their biggest records were originally country records that were done by John Michael Montgomery. I Swear, I Can Love You Like That. And for those of you that don't know, they originally did I Turn to You First before Christina Aguilera made it a smash hit. So let's talk about All for One.
All for One is one of those, I ain't gonna lie to you, they had to grow on me. It was one of those situations where I felt like All for One, very unique group, by the way. That's why I love them. Like, very, very unique group. Because when you have a guy, I forgot what Jamie
Delius, Tony,
voice,
and Albert.
What I love about those guys is that they were the perfect example. Very much like, in a lot of ways, very much like Boyz II Men, if you think about it. You know why? Because you had standard voices for certain things in that group. Jamie can sing soul, but Jamie just had this, I love Jamie's voice. Jamie just had this, for better, for worse, I love you with every beat of my heart, and I swear. It had a country thing to it, but it had such a strong pop cadence that can sell the record. And then you got somebody like D who got that soul. But you don't have to look no further. Like he had that real rich R&B sort of he had that Jeffrey Osborne type of thing with him. And Albert, the lone white guy in the crew, he can sound like a black guy. Not because he's trying to sound black. It's more so because the falsetto part of what his voice can do and how he can keep it registered, it all made a combination. And that's the reason why those first 2 albums were very successful, because to me, they had a pretty unique combination that some of the other 90s R&B groups did not have. And they did the hip hop thing too, but honestly, to me, they tried it, but it wasn't their strong suit. That wasn't what they, same way how I said Jodeci's up-tempos got better as time went along, but Jodeci wasn't what you call an up-tempo group. Their strength was in the ballads, the slow jams. Boyz II Men had a much more better take on the up-tempo stuff than Jodeci did. And Silk, to me, had both. Silk had the up-tempos and they had the slow jams.
Yeah. So for me, with Silk, what Elektra should have done was released the version of Lose Control that they did on Showtime and Apollo as a single. That version that they did that night was bananas.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, it would have worked either way because, I mean, you already know how I feel about Silk. Those are my ATL big brothers, and they're definitely in my top 5 as far as that era of groups is concerned, because here you got 5 incredible guys anchored by two very strong lead singers, and their penchant for harmony. And then what I loved about them the most, very much like All for One, is that I love the fact that they utilize the art and the dexterity skill of their bass singers. Of course, Timzo and Silk, and I forgot the guys. What's the guy's name in he's a Spanish guy in All for One. What's his name again?
I think
he said
Albert. I think
okay, I might have the names, but I'm sorry.
I think
I
that's
used to
Albert.
love on certain All for One songs how they would let him, like, I can love you like. I used to love when they would use the bass singer. So in Silk, it was the same thing. I love like on songs like Let's Make Love, all of a sudden, John is singing his lead and then here comes Timzo. Boom, boom, boom. Like just they utilize all of their voices
right
in that capacity. And to me, that's what made Silk the ultimate group to this very day. You listen to them a cappella. They utilize all of the voices that a 5-part. We don't have a lot of 5-part harmony groups anymore. As Yet was one of the last ones. That's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
They were among the last of that unit that utilized all 5 voices when it comes to harmony, and the fact that all 5 guys can actually sing lead.
Right. So, and you can catch my interview with Sean Rivera from As Yet. And when you're speaking of how groups utilize all 5 singers, and for me, that's what gave NSYNC the slight edge over Backstreet for me personally, because I prefer NSYNC vocally, because the way that they incorporate Lance and the way JC balances out Justin's vocals, and how Chris comes in on the highs and Joey fills in with the baritone. For me, it's magical. While Backstreet, you don't really have a true bass, and you have
Kevin's same bass.
Kevin's bass.
Yeah, you know what it is. I'm gonna tell you what Kevin's like. Not to cut you off. Kevin is very similar to one of my favorite singers from As Yet, and he's actually a huge influence on me, Kenny Terry. Why? Because if you remember Kenny Terry is very much like me. He can sing the lowest of the bottom bass, but Kenny got highs. Remember on Last Night, as we explore our visions of love.
That bottom.
Like Kenny got Kenny. If you listen to all the harmony parts, that's Kenny singing all the bass. But when Mark left the group, they had to sing Hard to Say I'm Sorry for a TV show. Kenny sang Mark's part, after all that we did do. And he was up here in his range. And then as soon as he finished his part, he went right back down to the bass note, bro. It ain't too many singers like that. Kevin Richardson is like that too. Now I can see that we're falling apart from the way that he can sing up there, but in the harmony structure, Kevin was the bottom bass. Now let me throw a little disagreement, not to you, but to the point of it. You're right about that. NSYNC had it, but I'm gonna tell you where NSYNC messed up at. This is just my personal opinion. Live-wise, it translated well. Studio, not at all. Because in the studio, the 1 or 2, 3 voices being used because Joey and Chris barely sang any. That's what they didn't let their other guys sing lead. The reason why the Backstreet Boys were able to continue and why they're still going as opposed to NSYNC is because in the Backstreet Boys, everybody can have their popular member. Nick and Brian may have sang lead on the majority of the songs, whatever the case may be, but everybody knows that all 5 Backstreet Boys can sing. There would be times where that's why you see like Full Force said, we gave the lead to Howie for All I Have to Give because they wasn't giving him no leads. It's like, and thank God he did that because think about it. If his lead didn't make a difference, that record would not have become the hit that it would became because they said, oh shit, Howie sings too. So that's why I said it's kind of an ill dilemma between both of those groups because I felt like NSYNC didn't utilize all of the guys enough, in my opinion. That's the reason why they ended so quickly because think about it. Even though Justin would end up leaving and then later JC, could they have continued as a group without them? In my personal opinion, no. But the Backstreet Boys, when Kevin left to go start a family, they still made albums that sold well into the millions overseas.
Right. And going back earlier, we were talking about Barrio Boys, and when I interviewed Bowlegged Lube, which you can find on YouTube, we were talking about them doing I Get Lifted for Barrio Boys and how it was the first appearance of Fat Joe. And for me, that How We Roll album, to me, it felt like that album that Backstreet Boys wanted to do if they gone full-blown R&B. You can catch my interview with Kenny Whitehead, who also did work on the Barrio Boys
Kenny
album.
White. Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah, but Barrio Boys, they were super dope. But like we're talking about SBK, I felt SBK didn't really have a clue on how to market their acts. Because like if you look at Barrio Boys, I mean, they were the precursor to everything that was to come before the Latin boom of the late 90s, early 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
And then what we're seeing now with CNCO and the whole...
Oh, make no mistake about it.
Barrio Boys would have been bigger had they been on the right label with the right push and understood what they were trying to do and knew that, hey, this demographic is coming. I felt the same way about Bobby Ross Avila as an artist.
Oh, wow. Wow. I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, Bobby Ross Avila, everybody knows for his production and songwriting, but as an artist, he was cold. And I think he got his potential shown once he left RCA and went over to Perspective and put out the My Destiny album with My Love, La La Love. I mean, Bobby Ross Avila, a bad brother.
La La Love is my shit. Yeah, bad guy all the way, dope guy.
Definitely a bad guy. And then while we're on the subject, real quickly on New Jack Swing, we talked about in the last interview, Al B, Cal West, Chucky Booker. What do you think? Who was the one unsung producer during that New Jack Swing era that constantly gets overlooked?
Oh, good question. I would have been able to say Chucky, but I can't say that because Chucky became so personified as an artist and a producer. So he's not overlooked at all. Everybody that knows. But somebody who, if I mention a name, they probably won't know off the bat. It's, who could I say? Definitely. I would say, honestly, I could tell you this, not producer-wise, but I could definitely tell you who was a key figure in that movement that should be talked about more. Timmy Gatlin.
And because here's the thing. Throwback interview with him as well.
Because Timmy, and I'm pretty sure that he was on my show as well. So you already know, you know what I know. And hearing, I mean, I already knew this stuff, but to hear him talk about it in a direct form that I haven't heard, no disrespect to Teddy, but I have not heard Teddy talk about the shit in the extreme form that it should be talked about in. Whereas Timmy was able to give me dates, what he used, how they wrote Piece of My Love, how this song, that's why it's easy for me to listen to Timmy. I'm like, Timmy's making a lot of sense. And I felt like because of all the stuff that him, and if we're going to talk about producers, then there you go right there. Let me help you out. Wokey Stewart.
Yep, another one.
Severely underrated. severely underrated, because he did not only work with Bell Biv DeVoe, he worked with Ralph too. And had those guys sing. I mean, they've always been beastly singers, but he had Ricky and Ralph singing at their best in their mature voices at that time. So he's severely underrated. I mean, and they're not counting the guys that came afterward, because I was going to say Dwayne Wiggins and of course Raphael, because all these guys are producers, but that's more geared toward neo soul and the kind of direction that R&B was moving in at that time. But if we're talking New Jack Swing, without question, I would have to go with Wokey and a couple other guys I'm not thinking off the top of my head. Oh, another guy we don't talk about enough, Bernard Bell, Regina Bell's
brother. Yeah, if you look at all of the Teddy Riley records, you would see his name listed on the credits.
Damn near everything.
And then I think another person out of that camp, secret sauce of all of Teddy and Bernard stuff, Tammy Lucas.
Oh, hell yeah. Come on now. We don't talk about that girl enough. You know what it is? Tammy's like another Lisa Keith. Think about it. Secret sauce. But a lot of, and I'm so glad that that Timmy mentioned her. I mean, I already knew, but I was going to say, as a matter of fact, Tammy had joined in that day when I had him on the show. She joined in and said we shouted her out. I'm like, Tammy, just so you know, we love you. We know about what you contributed to this game during the New Jack Swing era. And we're not going to ever talk about New Jack Swing and not mention you. I'm not having it. You're part of this. We're celebrating all of it. And it wasn't just Teddy. Yes, absolutely. Without question, the guy that helped, but he didn't do all the work by himself. He had people with him.
Right. And then another camp that is talked about a lot in New Jack Swing hip hop soul circles, of course, Untouchables with Eddie F, David Jam Hall.
Woo!
I mean, intros work. I mean, The Real Seduction. I mean,
Kenny Green by himself. Rest in peace. Another one.
Kenny Green was no joke. Intros, New Life album, and their debut, for me, all play through. No skips.
Standard. I agree. The platinum standard. Absolutely. Who else? Oh no, can't forget about Soul Convention, Prince Marky D and Corey Rooney. Without question.
Yes, sir. I'm in
another genius. Absolutely.
Off of Target. Shout out to Target using Real Love in the ad campaign. You know, Marky D, their production, nuts. Because I caught the interview that you did with Prince Marky D and was listening to the stories. I was like, yo,
yeah,
it could have been bigger had, you know, certain politics not gotten in the way. But yo, his production,
usually,
you know, I was just like, man, people need to take him seriously as a producer and stop seeing him as the guy from the Fat Boys.
Well, I mean, it's not even, you know what, Jay? It's not even so much about them not being taken seriously. It's really more so about, again, people who know. So you got to remember, there was nobody really there outside of my legendary uncles and people who I came up in the industry. Most times I was by myself. So I learned things on my own about what some of the guys behind the scenes and where some of my favorite acts had went when I didn't see them doing videos and stuff and stuff like that. Like I always, if you see on that interview, I made the joke because people don't realize when I remember watching Treat It Like They Want to Be Treated, and I said, hold up, that's like Prince Marky D. And of course found out because Prince Marky D and Corey Rooney produced the record and then featured a unknown Jodeci at that particular time and Sean Puffy Combs dancing in the video. There you go.
Mm-hmm. And we're definitely
it's about who knows and studies their homework. Because you remember, here's the thing, and let me just say this: I don't expect people to be deep like me. Everybody's not deep like me, and that's cool. Like I said, you don't have to be. I didn't sit in my room and say I'm going to become the greatest music historian there ever was. No, the reason why I know what I know, just like you do, is simply because we made conscious decisions. We were interested in the behind the scenes, and of course, me, because I'm between me and you, I'm an artist. So it's like I studied the front and the back and the left and the right of the music industry, the artistic viewpoint and the business viewpoint, the production, what goes into it. And because I had an early start, look who my family is. I was already in the studio at 7 learning about production. Remember, I saw Set It Off by Straight being made. That's my mother's band leader, Steve. See, y'all know him as Straight. That's Uncle Steve to me. You understand what I'm saying? I saw when Set It Off was being made before it became the hit that it became. I was only 8 years old, man. I watched Radar and Steve make that track. I saw that being made. So I already kind of was hip to it. So I can't help it if I decided to do the homework and dig deeper as I got older. I love music that much. Now, you're not a musician, but obviously you love music that much because you studied enough to say, I want to know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm fascinated by the movers and the shakers who made these artists who I love pop off. Am I right?
Yes, you are correct. And before we talk about your current projects and everything like that, I want to talk about a male vocalist, mid 80s R&B, powerful vocals, doesn't get enough mention, had hits off the Prelude record label with cuts such as Keep On, You're the One for Me,
Man.
Something's on Your Mind, Ice Melts in the Rain. Can we talk about D Train?
D Train. Oh, man. Genius. A man who simply, in my humble opinion, now see, again, going back to what I said earlier, those who know, know. D Train, without question, is one of the most important singer-songwriters that helped in aiding in the transition or the combination of traditional R&B and contemporary R&B. In other words, where it had just ended and where it was going. That's why to this very day, when you put on You're the One for Me or Keep On, what happens? 2021, you put them records on. Reach and reach. See what I mean? That's like those songs are still personified and rectified in the culture of R&B, pop, dance, disco, whatever the fuck you want to call it. So we can't talk about that early 80s transition and not talk about D Train. That's how important and vital to the game. To me, in my opinion, he does not get enough conversation.
No, he definitely does not. Keep Giving Me Love, another cut. We could just go down the list of all of his cuts, but let's go ahead and let's talk about your current projects and also where can folks get the merch?
Okay, here we go. So absolutely, as everybody knows, my third album is out, Mega Dope Maniac, which is doing really, really well, as you already know. We made a lot of playlists this year. The streaming has been going excellent. As a matter of fact, my duet with Roger Ortega called Part Like We Used To is currently #2 on the Back to Beat radio station for the EDM Countdown show. We're #2 right now, which is amazing considering the fact that this is one of the most popular songs off my record. There's only 8 songs on this album. I have a few more albums coming out before the year is over. We coming hard this year, like making up for lost time and a lot of different things I had to make sure was right before we continue. And of course, I'm featured on Jelly Bean's new album. Jelly Bean Johnson from Mars Ain't the Time has an album that showcases his incredible guitar work in addition to what he's done on drums. And the most popular song is the one that I wrote called She Can Get It. And his whole album is available at jellybeanjohnson.com. So you can actually go get that album. It's not available for streaming. We're not doing streaming with that album. This is all CD, vinyl, and cassette. So people that want to get a hold of that and you want to hear the best in funk R&B from the real Minneapolis gods, go to jellybeanjohnson.com to get that record. I'm on 2 songs. I got She Can Get It, which I wrote and produced, and I'm featured on Shattered Pieces, which I wrote, and I did a duet alongside with a lovely Tamar Davis, who also wrote the song as well. So they can check those out right now. And we got a whole bunch of other stuff getting ready to come out. My artist, Arizona Lindsay, just got signed with a huge PR firm out in Nashville. I co-produced her album, The Process, which is a country pop album. So that's coming out in sometime in April. And I'm in the studio right now with the incredible Tina Torres, which you're going to hear a lot of incredible Latin rock, pop fused with R&B and hip hop. So I can't wait till you hear that project as well. So that's my stance as a producer and a writer, in addition to all my artistry stuff that we got going on now. And as far as the merch, absolutely, they can contact me on facebook.com/LawPlanet12. They can hit me up in the inbox because we have Celia's Closet. They can contact at celiascloset@gmail.com. Of course, the stuff is already posted up in terms of what we have. As you know, we have the hats, we have the shirts, we have the alien socks, we have the alien face mask, and we also got hoodies are on their way. We have red and black t-shirts with my logo and my imprint and my image. Of course, I own it, it's mine. And so far, it's been selling out really, really fast. You've probably seen it the last couple of days, man. It's been moving. It's really, really moving. The fans are showing so much love to us, and they've been waiting a long time for me to put out merch. So I took the time and I made it happen.
Yeah, they're definitely going like hotcakes. So hit them up so that you can get your law merch, the skull caps, the shirts, the socks, the
shirts,
so that you can be in style when you go to a law show. So now plug your social.
Absolutely,
bro. Plug your social.
Absolutely. Oh, before I about, don't forget, y'all. I want to take this time for everybody who's watching that's probably been fans of mine and just fans of us in general. Thank you so much for the incredible success of the Planet Soul podcast, because as everybody knows, this podcast was started. And then, of course, you being such an influence over the years, because I've always said to myself that if I'm going to do a podcast of any caliber, it would be along the lines of what us guys represent in terms of being true music heads, because I felt like a lot of other podcasts were very boring and they asked the same questions. So thanks to the fans that have made the Planet Soul podcast a tremendous success on Instagram. You know, we're getting a lot of exclusives. There's been a lot of phone calls coming in. A lot of other artists want to get on because they love what we do on our show. So thank you for supporting it as well, because you've been very instrumental in promoting us and doing everything like that. So I just want to take that time to thank you publicly in front of the fans to let them know that there are Black men that do support each other in terms of what we're doing, because we are all in this together for the safety and the protection of our culture, especially on the musical level, and especially at a time like this. And that's all another conversation we want to get into. So it's important.
Yeah, definitely important. So shout out to the collective, Derek, Ron, you guys know who you are.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, you know who you are. So this interview will be available on all streaming platforms. Anchor,
yes, it
Apple,
will.
Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, and you can go to YouTube of the same name, Beyond the Album Cover, where you can catch the video version as well. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, my brother from another mother, Law, on Beyond the Album with your boy. Thank you once again, bro, for coming on.
Thank you. Planet Soul forever, baby. We got it.
Yes, sir. All right, so the interview, it is going to drop on